21-year-old Shannon Christian and her 23-year-old boyfriend, Christopher Newsom, were known for their sociable nature, rarely missing a chance to gather with friends. Their absence from a planned birthday celebration in Knoxville, Tennessee, was therefore highly unusual and concerning. The couple had made arrangements to attend, but never arrived, ceasing all communication and ignoring calls and texts. This unsettling silence marked the beginning of a horrific ordeal, a crime that would become one of Tennessee's most brutal. Shannon, born in 1985 in the modest Texas town of Nacogdoches, population just over 30,000, grew up with her older brothers, Jason and Chase. Her parents, Mary and Dina Christian, cherished their children, particularly Shannon, as her birth followed a challenging period of infertility. Doctors had held little hope of Dina conceiving, making Shannon's arrival a precious gift. When Shannon reached 12, the family relocated to the larger city of Knoxville, Tennessee, seeking better opportunities. There, Shannon flourished, surrounded by a supportive network of family and friends. She maintained a close bond with both parents, but her relationship with her mother, Dina, was especially strong. Dina possessed a remarkable ability to listen and offer impartial advice, a trait Shannon inherited. This empathy guided Shannon towards a degree in sociology after high school. Unlike many young adults eager to leave the nest, Shannon remained happily at home with her parents, enjoying their close-knit family dynamic. This allowed her to focus on her studies and engage in meaningful conversations with her mother about her newfound knowledge. They often shared intimate talks about the future, envisioning marriage and a family of 4 children, Shannon's heartfelt desire. Despite living at home, Shannon was independent and driven. To support herself financially, she worked 2 jobs while pursuing her education. A few months before the tragedy, she achieved a significant milestone, purchasing a silver Toyota 4Runner SUV, a source of immense pride. Christopher Chris Newsom Jr., born in 1983 in Knoxville, was the cherished and eagerly awaited son of Hugh and Valerie Newsom. From infancy, he exuded energy and enthusiasm, finding peace only in sleep. A natural athlete, he excelled at baseball and nurtured a passion for woodworking, crafting various items for his family. As a teenager, his interest shifted to motorcycles and mechanics, although he eventually returned to carpentry, pursuing it as a profession. Throughout his life, Chris maintained his love for sports, enjoying baseball, golf, tennis, and fishing. Despite his active lifestyle, he remained a kind and compassionate individual, easily forming friendships and providing unwavering support to loved ones. Chris and Shannon's paths crossed in 2006. Friends of Chris's parents had sought Dina's counsel, leading to a chance encounter between the 2 young adults. They connected instantly and quickly became inseparable, spending their free time together, enjoying outdoor activities, particularly golf. Long walks between holes provided ample opportunity for deep conversations, cementing their bond. Family and friends observed their growing affection and anticipated an imminent wedding. Their future seemed bright and promising, making the cruel fate that awaited them all the more shocking. On the evening of January 6, 2007, Chris and Shannon planned a dinner date followed by a birthday party for a mutual friend. Shannon spent the afternoon preparing at a friend's house, packing an overnight bag before heading to an apartment complex in Washington Ridge, where she left her car. Around 8 p.m., she waited in the parking lot for Chris, who was running late after dropping off a friend. His tardiness caused a brief disagreement, quickly resolved with a hug. Tragically, they never reached their dinner destination, vanishing without a trace. Early on January 7th, a sense of dread awakened Dina. Finding Shannon's room empty, she tried calling her daughter's cell phone, only to reach voicemail. Several missed calls from unknown numbers fueled her anxiety. Returning one of the calls, she spoke to a friend of Shannon's, who confirmed her worst fears. Neither Shannon nor Chris had arrived at the party. Their absence was deeply unsettling, as both were responsible individuals who wouldn't intentionally miss a planned event. Growing increasingly worried, Shannon's friends revisited the apartment complex where they had last seen her, discovering Chris's truck but no sign of Shannon's vehicle or the couple. Later, Dina received a call from Shannon's employer, expressing concern over her absence from work. Dina's fear intensified, prompting her to contact Chris's parents, who shared her growing apprehension. Together, they decided to report the couple missing, but the police, adhering to the 24-hour waiting period, dismissed their concerns, assuming the couple were simply out with friends. Despite the parents' insistence that such behavior was completely out of character, their pleas fell on deaf ears. Left with no other option, the families initiated their own search, focusing on the parking lot where Chris and Shannon were last seen. Their efforts yielded no results. Simultaneously, they contacted various city services and acquaintances, desperately seeking information, but to no avail. On the afternoon of January 7th, a grim discovery was made. A railroad worker stumbled upon a severely burned body near the tracks, discarded on a pile of rocks. The police were notified, marking a tragic turning point in the search for the missing couple. A young man's body, severely burned and unidentifiable without forensic analysis, was discovered. The families of two missing persons, Channon and Christopher, clung to hope, continuing their search. Geolocation data from Shannon's phone placed it last near a cell tower in a rough part of town, an area the couple had no reason to visit. It was a 10-kilometer detour from their intended route, suggesting they were either there for illicit purposes or against their will. By Monday, January 8th, the parents were searching the area. They located Shannon's car in an alley, stripped of all personal items, stickers, a teddy bear, dashboard photos, even the phone charger and headphones. The driver's seat was pushed back too far for normal driving. A pack of cigarettes lay between the seats, unusual as neither Shannon nor Chris smoked. The floor mats were dirty, a stark contrast to Shannon's usual meticulous care for her prized first car. The condition of the vehicle pointed towards the presence of strangers. Kidnapping seemed likely, yet no ransom demands were made. The parents notified law enforcement, who, after the initial 24-hour waiting period, had already begun their investigation. The car and recovered items were taken for analysis. Meanwhile, the medical examiner's preliminary report on the body found by the railroad tracks detailed horrific injuries. Gunshot wounds to the head, neck, and body, along with abrasions and evidence of a severe beating, were noted. Evidence of sexual assault was also present. The victim was shoeless, his feet muddy, his body wrapped in a blanket with a hoodie covering his head. Despite the fire damage, the body was identified as Christopher Newsom. His parents were spared the ordeal of visual identification, having only seen the unopened body bag. Shannon's parents still held on a hope, though frustrated by the perceived initial police inaction. The police intensified their search for Channon, concerned that the family's handling of the car might have compromised evidence. However, a crucial clue emerged: an envelope bearing the address 2316 Shipman Street, discovered between the car seats, presumably dropped by the perpetrator. This address was 10 kilometers from the couple's last known location and merely 2 blocks from where Shannon's car was found. Fingerprints on the envelope identified Lamarcus Davidson, recently released from prison after serving time for aggravated carjacking. He immediately became the prime suspect in Chris's murder and Shannon's disappearance. That night, police descended upon Davidson's rented house in an industrial area, receiving no response to their knocks, but believing Channon might be held captive inside. They forced entry. Inside, they discovered items belonging to the missing couple: Shannon's headphones, Chris's shoes, and baseball cap. Their grim discovery continued in the kitchen. A trash can held a soiled sheet concealing a garbage bag. Inside, they found Shannon's body. Unlike Chris's burned remains, Shannon's body bore the full extent of the horrific violence inflicted upon her. Clad only in a tank top, her body was covered in bruises, deep stab wounds, and burns. Evidence of sexual assault, along with Davidson's DNA and fingerprints, was present. Matching prints were found on the trash, can, and packages in Shannon's car. Spent cartridges from the gun used to kill Chris were also recovered from the house. Davidson, however, was gone, having evidently fled. A manhunt ensued. Unbeknownst to the police at the time, Davidson was not alone in his crimes. Analysis of his phone records revealed frequent calls to an individual named Eric Boyd, suggesting his involvement in the horrific events surrounding Channon and Chris's final hours. The net closed in swiftly. The very next day, patrol officers intercepted Eric Boyd's vehicle. He was directly questioned about Davidson's whereabouts. Initially, Boyd offered some resistance, attempting to evade the officers' inquiries. However, under increasing pressure, he finally revealed his accomplice's location. Boyd explicitly stated his unwillingness to face imprisonment for another man's crimes, leading officers to the building robbed the same day the young couple was abducted. Boyd guided the officers to a nearby vacant house listed for sale, close to Davidson's residence. Inside, they discovered a scene of disarray. Numerous trash bags, discarded food wrappers, scattered clothing, a cell phone, a firearm, and binoculars. Crucially, amidst this chaos, they found Lamarcus Davidson. Davidson was immediately apprehended and transported to the police station. Notably, he was wearing Nike sneakers identified as belonging to the murdered young man. During interrogation, Davidson attempted to portray himself as a victim. He offered no less than 5 different versions of the events that led Chris and Channon to their horrific ordeal. In his initial account, he claimed the couple arrived at his residence voluntarily, but were subsequently accosted by his acquaintances. He asserted that these individuals assaulted the couple, and that he, recognizing the imbalance of power, chose to remove himself from the situation. Davidson claimed to use Shannon's vehicle to drive to a nearby neighborhood to sell drugs, waiting for the situation to de-escalate. He then abandoned the car in an alley. Upon returning to his residence, he alleged that Channon was still bound and pleading for release, but he chose not to intervene. Davidson vehemently denied any involvement in Chris's death and any sexual contact with Channon, despite the later discovery of his semen on her body. He identified the 2 individuals who allegedly assaulted the couple as George Thomas, his close friend, and Latalvis Cobbins, his half-brother. Both were arrested on January 11th as accomplices to the murder. However, the list of individuals implicated in the brutal crime continued to grow. It now included Eric Boyd, the very person who had divulged Davidson's hiding place. Davidson further implicated Vanessa Coleman, an 18-year-old friend, in the torture. The male perpetrators ranged in age from 24 to 35. Piece by piece, the apprehended individuals recounted the final horrific hours of Chris and Shannon's lives. Each confession added to the mounting evidence uncovered by the police, while simultaneously attempting to minimize their own involvement and shift blame onto their accomplices. It became clear that Lamarcus Davidson was the mastermind behind the horrific events. That evening, Davidson needed a vehicle to deliver drugs. He and his accomplice encountered Channon conversing with Chris in a parking lot. Instead of simply stealing the car, they decided to eliminate any witnesses. Brandishing weapons, they abducted the couple and transported them to Davidson's residence, where a nightmare awaited them. Latalvis Cobbins denied any sexual contact with either victim. However, DNA evidence unequivocally proved he had raped Channon, as had Davidson multiple times. Vanessa Coleman claimed to be a hostage, just like the victims. She asserted that fear for her life compelled her to comply with the perpetrators and participate in the torture, despite her revulsion. Through meticulous analysis and compilation of information from all participants, law enforcement officials reconstructed the horrifying sequence of abuse that culminated in the deaths of 2 innocent people. Immediately following the abduction, Channon and Chris were bound and gagged in the back of Shannon's car and driven to Davidson's house. Channon was restrained in the living room, while Chris was taken to another room, bound, and repeatedly sexually assaulted by multiple individuals, the exact identities of whom remain unclear. The following morning, Chris was led from the house on chains, like a dog, and forced into the trunk of a car. He was driven to a railway embankment and forced to walk barefoot across the sharp stones. After walking approximately 20 meters, he was shot once in the back and once in the neck. These shots, however, did not prove fatal. The final, deadly shot was delivered to the head at close range, severing his brain stem and ending his ordeal. The perpetrators then doused his body with gasoline and set it alight in an attempt to destroy evidence of their horrific acts. Meanwhile, Channon, unaware of her boyfriend's fate, was fighting for her own life in Davidson's house. Upon returning from murdering Chris, the perpetrators turned their attention back to Channon. She was subjected to a prolonged and savage beating, resulting in severe head trauma. She was then tied to a chair and repeatedly raped. The assault continued with further beatings to her face, head, and groin. For 2 agonizing days, the cycle of beatings and rape continued, causing extensive lacerations and internal bleeding. In a grotesque attempt to erase evidence, the 5 perpetrators doused Channon's still-living body with bleach, attempting to remove fingerprints and DNA. They poured the corrosive chemical onto her open wounds and even forced it down her throat. They tried to scrape the skin from her body, yet she remained alive, pleading for mercy. Her pleas were ignored. A garbage bag was placed over her head, and she was bound and stuffed into more garbage bags before being placed inside a kitchen trash can, where she slowly and agonizingly suffocated. Medical examiners could not definitively determine how long Channon's excruciating death took, but the extreme brutality was undeniable. The sadistic nature of the injuries was so horrific that they defied the typical descriptions of even the most brutal rape and murder cases, shocking even seasoned police officers and forensic experts. Her lip was completely severed, and her neck was broken, likely during the beatings. After leaving Channon to die in the trash can, the perpetrators simply walked away. Following the murders, Davidson gave some of Shannon's belongings to Vanessa Coleman. These items were later recovered by police during a search of her residence. Investigators dismissed Coleman's claims of being a hostage, asserting that she had ample opportunity to contact authorities after leaving Davidson's house, but chose not to. This horrific case began with the discovery of a diary during a search of Vanessa Coleman's residence. The diary detailed the brutal attack on Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom, describing the ordeal as a sort of twisted summer adventure. The cheerful tone and descriptive language used painted a disturbing picture of Coleman's involvement, clearly indicating her complicity in the crimes. Lamarcus Davidson and George Thomas faced 16 counts of capital murder, rape, robbery, kidnapping, and especially aggravated murder. Vanessa Coleman was charged with 12 counts, including murder, involvement in rape, robbery, kidnapping, and theft, reflecting her active participation in the torture of both victims. Eric Boyd received 20 counts of aggravated rape, kidnapping, and theft. Lethal Viscobins faced the same 20 counts as the rest of this brutal group. The families of Channon and Christopher endured a grueling 2-year trial, riddled with revisions and delays. During the proceedings, Davidson, the ringleader, fabricated a story claiming the couple willingly engaged in rough sex, which escalated when his accomplices arrived and began beating them. This account, however, was completely unconvincing. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury delivered guilty verdicts on multiple counts for all defendants. Given the sheer brutality of the crimes, which defied conventional criminal definitions, the victims' families sought the death penalty. Lamarcus Davidson was convicted on all charges and sentenced to death, with an additional 80 years in prison. Eric Boyd, George Thomas, and Lethal Viscobins received life sentences without the possibility of parole. In 2010, Vanessa Coleman was acquitted of first-degree murder but sentenced to 53 years for the remaining charges. A shocking twist emerged when Judge Baumgartner, who presided over the case, resigned due to substance abuse issues, casting doubt on numerous convictions, including those in this case. The state Supreme Court upheld Davidson's and Cobbin's convictions due to the presence of DNA evidence, but the others faced review. Coleman was again found guilty on the same charges, but her sentence was reduced to 35 years. George Thomas, initially sentenced to life without parole, was granted the possibility of parole after 51 years for cooperating with the prosecution. Subsequent appeals by both Coleman and Thomas were unsuccessful. Eric Boyd, in a new trial in 2019, pleaded guilty to 36 counts. His guilt corroborated largely by George Thomas's testimony. He received 2 life sentences without parole and an additional 90 years. In 2014, Vanessa Coleman became eligible for parole after serving only 7 years, but thankfully, her requests were denied. Her most recent attempt in 2020 was also rejected, with the parole board setting her next eligibility date for 2030. The house where the horrific events unfolded was demolished in 2008, replaced by a memorial dedicated to the memory of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom.